Does your car smell like burning oil or fuel when running? Well, don't worry, today I'm going to show you how to replace your rocker and valve cover gaskets as well as your valve tube seals, which will stop oil leaking into the spark plugs, eliminating the smell of burning oil. Plus, this can also help to prevent misfires, which will eliminate the smell of fuel from your car running badly. For more on every step of the car flipping process, subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next upload. I'm Benjamin Mechanic and welcome back to Ben Flips Cars. So the first step is we want to remove this tubing here, connecting the air intake to the throttle body and the intake manifold so that we can get access to this valve cover and remove it here, which will gain us access to the coil set. So in this case, there was simply just 2 bolts that you can see here holding down the tube. And once you undid those 2 bolts, you can just slide the tubing off the intake manifold. Then to get it off the air intake box, you just had to loosen off this clamp here, and then it would slide right off just like the other end. Then we also had to remove the throttle body here for when we take off the rocket cover later. So you just have to remove these 2 sensors on either side, which are just clips, and then 4 bolts around the throttle body, and then it was able to slide right out. Cool, so I've got the throttle body off now. Just a few things to note. The bottom bolts of the throttle body are threaded through that, so you have to pull them out before you can pull the throttle body off. And the throttle body also has a gasket, as I just showed on the camera, that we're going to replace. It comes in the kit. With the tubing and throttle body out of the way, we can get on to removing this hose up the back that we also need to remove so that we can get the valve cover off. Great, so now with our intake tubing and throttle body detached, it gives us all the room we need to get this valve cover off. Also, I would just block off this intake hole with a clean microfiber towel, and same with the other intake hole, because you don't want any dirt or debris getting into these intakes as you're working on the car. If you suck any dirt in through the intake manifold into the engine, it could cause big problems for your engine. Then we can get on to removing the 6 bolts that are holding in the valve cover, as well as the oil filler cap, and then the valve cover should be able to slide off. And man, oh man, you can see now with the valve cover off, this is where our problems lie. Look at this, that oil, not meant to be there. That's leaking through these 2 grommets here, so we need to fix them. These are all the coils. I mean, looking around and feeling around, you can see there's oil all on top of them as well. So that's from the valve tube seals. So replacing all these gaskets and seals is going to fix all these oil leaks. And we're also going to want to give all the area a good clean up of the oil as well. Just a quick note, this is from the oil cap, so we're going to want to put that back on there. And then put the oil cap back on so that nothing gets inside of the rocker cover whilst we're working on this valve cover section. Next, we're going to pull out all of these coils, and as you can see, there's no real way to know where all the connections go back, so I'm just going to label them with a bit of masking tape as you put them all back on. I don't know if it even matters the order that you put them on in, but I'm assuming it does, so I'm going to make sure I label them. So there you go, you can see those labels, simple as that, masking tape and some Sharpie. Next, we just want to remove all the wiring from the top of the rocker cover, so that includes the left and right grommet wiring as well as the 6 connections to each of the coils. Then go ahead and remove the valve cover gasket as well. We're going to be replacing this anyway, and place the disconnected wiring off to the side and out of the way so that we can get the rocker cover out. Then we can remove all the actual coils. There's 6 in this case because we have a 6-cylinder car. You just give them a good tug to pull them out. You can see all the oil all over that coil. Not good, not what we want. So make sure to give that a good clean up. You can see in here is where our issues lie. There's a little slit there between down there where the spark plug is, the valve tube. The seal in there is what's gone bad, allowing the oil to leak in. You can see it in there as well a little. So those are the valve seals here, which we have to replace them with. Okay, so now that all the coils are out, we can see that those back 4 are dry. It's just these front 2 that have the leaks, but nonetheless, we're going to replace all the seals and hopefully get no issues with the other ones. If the front 2 have gone, it's likely the others will go at some point in the near future. Now, the only other bits we need to take out of these, because we want to replace them, they do come in the replacement kit, and you can see they're leaking quite badly as well. So to remove those grommets, it's just simply a couple of bolts on each side. Easy stuff. And there we go, that's come right out. You can see all this oil that's been leaking out the bottom, so obviously that seal's gone bad also. And now with all our coils and those 2 front grommets removed, we just need to take out these 2 Torx bolts at the front and these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 hex head bolts, and then we should be able to take the rocker cover off. So with the Torx bolts, they don't come all the way out. In fact, I think all the bolts on the top, they don't come all the way out. You just got to do them until they're no longer in their threads and they're loose. Pretty straightforward. Now we have all the bolts loosened, so now we should be able to get the rocker cover off. You can see it moves around there. It just needs to slide back so it gets over the top of those things, and then it should be able to come up. So let's see how we go. So as you can see, by the fact that I've had to speed it up, it was a bit of an awkward shuffle to try and get the rocker cover off, especially because of that hose up the back, which I actually ended up disconnecting so I could get it back on easier, and I should have disconnected it in the first place so that I could have gotten it off more easily. And there you go, rocker cover is off. You can see all the components of the engine here. There's your timing chain, and as you can see, here we go. These are the valve tubes. You can see the oil around the ring of that one, oil around the ring of that one, but on those back four, they're pretty dry, so you can tell that those rings were okay. Now we really want to make sure we don't get any dirt inside of this crankcase here. So I'm going to close the hood over as I'm working on the parts out here. And then this is the underside of the rocker cover. So this is the gasket that's fallen out, that comes out of there. So we're going to clean all that up, put the new gasket in. And you can see these are the valve tube seals here. You can see those four look okay. These are the ones that were leaking. To be honest, they don't really look any worse than the others, but you can see all that oil there, whereas the other ones are dry. So we're going to replace all those valve tube seals and this rocker cover gasket as well. So this oil leaking into the valve tube seals is what's caused the smell of burning oil, and if you smell the coils that had the leaking valve tube seals, you can really smell that strong smell of burning oil. This can also affect, of course, inside here you can see the coil in there. The oil can affect that coil, and it can also affect the spark plug, which you can see down at the bottom of those tubes, which can potentially cause a misfire and for your engine to run bad, which then can lead to your engine running rich and stinking of fuel, as mine was. So what we want to do before we put anything back together or any new seals in is clean up all these surfaces. You can use a plastic scraper. You don't want to use any hard metal against these aluminum surfaces, because if you scratch them, it's going to lead to basically a permanent leak you can't fix. Same with these, we want to clean all these up and try and clean the oil out from inside the valve tubes. We also want to clean up all along where the new seal is going to go, as well as when we pull the valve tube seals out, clean up all in there, and also clean up all this oil on top of the rocker cover case. Basically, we want everything to be clean before anything goes back together. So now we just want to remove everything we need to from the rocker cover. You can see the rocker cover gasket already came out. You can see it was not in the greatest of condition, so good thing we're going to be replacing this, so we can put that aside. And that's all come out from around here. You can see all those nasty little spots in there that we're going to need to clean out. And we also want to pull out the valve seals. These weren't actually in too bad a shape, or at least, of course, those ones at the back aren't going to be, are they? Because those ones had no issues. Still looked like they were probably about ready to be replaced though. Check out these ones here, the ones that had the issue. And really, they don't look much different, except for the fact that they've got oil coming out of them. But anyway, let's remove all of them, because we're going to replace all of them. The kit that I bought also includes this little grommet here that I could replace, but as you can see, there's no leaks, so I don't think I'm going to bother with that. How many of your valve tubes were leaking? Let me know in the comments below. If your car happens to have peeling clear coat or paint that you need fixing, check out this video in the corner here explaining how to fix it. Now let's get to cleaning all the surfaces where all the new gaskets are going to go so that we get a clean seal. So first, starting off here with the rocker cover. To clean the rocker cover gasket area, I just used some degreaser sprayed onto a microfiber towel. You don't want to spray the degreaser into the rocker cover, because degreaser could break down the oil inside of the engine once it mixes with the degreaser. So I was just using a brush as well to try and brush out some of that dirt, as well as a scraper with the microfiber towel on the end to just sort of stick it into that crack and wipe out some of the dirt. And there you go, you can see we've done a relatively good job of cleaning up all those gasket areas where the new gaskets are going to go. Now let's just make sure we go and clean the top as well, and these bits here that were leaking also. Now all along this surface where the rocker cover gasket is going to rest, I'm going to go along it with a plastic scraper. Make sure it's plastic and not metal. If you use a metal one, it'll probably damage the aluminium block, which will lead to basically a permanent leak that you can't fix. Then once I've scraped down all the surface, I'll simply put some degreaser onto a rag and rub off any excess extra dirt. You can see that surface is looking way cleaner now, meaning we'll get a much better seal with the new gasket. Last thing we want to do is, you can see I've done to the back four already, is clean those surfaces where the valve tube seals are going to go. With these last two, of course, I'm going to clean off the surfaces for them as well, but there's also some oil down in the spark plug, so I got to figure out if I'm going to either remove the spark plug and clean the oil out, or just try and clean it out as it is. Either way, you want to get as much oil out of there as possible. So as you can see, I managed to get most of the oil out. There is still a tad in that one and a little bit more at the bottom of that one, but I mean, that's all going to dry up and boil up once the engine's running really hot, which is probably not the best approach to it, but I just don't have the tool to get the spark plug out, so I'm just going to leave it at that. It should be okay. If the oil damage is really bad, it might also be worth getting another set of coils, but you can see these coils are still fairly new. I got them replaced not that long ago, so I just made sure to clean off all the oil as best as I can, and they should work just fine going back into the engine. Just make sure you get all the oil out from particularly this connection in here and the ends of them. With the surface nice and clean, let's install the new rocker cover gasket. Because it's basically elastic and stretchy, it sort of holds itself in place once you install it, so you don't need to use any gasket goo or glue or anything like that. It just keeps itself under tension and in place. With our new valve tube seals, you can see these go in, but it's quite loose, and I think that's going to fall out when we flip the rocker cover upside down, so we're just going to put something in here. I've been told grease will do the trick in making this stay in place when you flip this over so that it doesn't fall out. Something like gasket goo or silicone could also do the trick. So here we go, we've got ourselves some general workshop grease. Get a little dab of that outside of the seal, and then just pop it on into there, and that should hold that in place. We just want to do that for all of them. And don't worry, a bit of grease of course is not ideal inside the rocker cover, but a lot of it's going to dissolve into the oil. A little bit should be okay. Now let's carefully reinstall the rocker cover, ensuring none of the new gaskets or valve tube seals come loose or fall out as you're installing it. And now that that rocker cover's back on top, you just want to shine in there and see as best you can to make sure that those valve tube seals didn't move as you're putting it on. I think we're okay. And then you also want to check around the edge, make sure the rocker cover went on alright. Rocker cover gasket stayed in place, and that looks okay as well. Once you're happy everything's lined up and in the correct place, start tightening down all the bolts. Don't tighten them super tight yet, just until they're starting to tighten up. And then once you've got all of them semi-tight, you want to tighten them all down in a crisscross pattern so that you get a nice even seal with the gaskets and the valve tubes. Then you can place in those two grommets, and they'll fit in now that everything's been tightened down along the top of the rocker cover. Pop their little bolts in and get them nice and tight as well, because we don't want any oil leaking out of those new grommet seals. Then pop the wiring back into its little slots along the top of the rocker cover in preparation to put the coils back in. Ensure any oil is cleaned off the end of the coils, and then connect the coils back into the coil set wiring and reinstall the coils back into the valve tubes. So I've just reinstalled the old coil set. As I said, if your car has a bad misfire, it could need new coils, but these were replaced not too long ago, so I just cleaned them up and they should be okay. Then we'll just install the valve cover gasket into the valve cover. This one was definitely a bit trickier. Unfortunately, it wouldn't stay in place like the rocker cover did itself, so use some gasket goo, or in this case I used a little bit of super glue, and that held it in place just enough so that I could get the valve cover back on without the valve cover gasket falling out. Then don't forget to reinstall your oil filler cap, pop in all the bolts on top of the valve cover and tighten them down. Then, as I briefly mentioned earlier, I actually did end up unclipping this hose so that I could get the valve and rocker cover in and out more easily. So just pop it back into its clip at the back, slot it back onto the nozzle and do up the hose clamp, make sure it's nice and snug. When reinstalling the throttle body, make sure it's clean before you reinstall it. Just some degreaser or some CRC or something can clean it up, but this one was fairly good as it was, so I didn't bother. And inside of the kit that we got also includes a new throttle body gasket, so also a good idea to install the new one there. And of course, don't forget to clip those sensors back in on either side of the throttle body. Reinstall the tubing that connects the throttle body and air intake. do up the 2 bolts that hold it in place, as well as clamp down the clip, and the job should be all done. There we go, that should be a job well done. We've got everything reinstalled, so now we're just gonna start up the car, make sure everything's running properly and check for any leaks. So she started right up, no problems, so that's good. We're just gonna give everything some time to calibrate as we've disconnected sensors, etc., things like that. But basically you want to check for if there's any oil leaking around your new rocker cover gasket, should be fine there. And then also smell for that burning oil or petrol. Unfortunately, unless we take the valve cover back off, we're not going to be able to check if there's any new oil leaking. But if you let it run for a bit and it's not smelling like oil or fuel, then most likely you fixed all the leaks. If you have any questions, drop it in a comment below or to message me directly. I'm on Instagram and TikTok, also at Ben Flips Cars. Like the video to help me out with the YouTube algorithm, and subscribe so you don't miss the next car flipping video. I'm Benjamin McShannock, and thank you for watching Ben Flips Cars.